Is it the middle of August yet? Is it time for a mid-month wrap-up? Hi, my name is Jeanette, and I want to thank you for joining me on the channel Jane Reads. So it's not quite the middle of August yet when I am filming this, but I am doing a mid-month wrap-up because I am getting ready to start At Love's Command by Karen Whitmire, which is book one of the Hanger's Horseman series, and I plan on doing a vlog on reading that full series. I'm going to plan to read all three books in that vlog. So I thought, well, let's do a mid-month wrap-up of the books I've read so far this month, because I've already read five. And so I'll talk about those. Then I will have that vlog video for those three, and then I'll have my monthly wrap up at the end of the month. So that's my plan. So what have I read so far this month? I have read the first book we're going to talk about. Look at my notes. The first book I finished was Driftwood Bay by Irene Hannon. This is book number 5 in the Hope Harbor series, and we are following the characters of Jeanette Mason and Logan West. He doesn't give his last name. So one, I want to say, it was really weird for me reading a character named Jeanette. Even if she spelled her name differently than me, it just, every time I read it, I was thrown off every single time. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not used to having my name in a book, and I think that's why it was like, I'm not used to anybody else having my name, which is why, like, I've only ever known one other Jeanette in my life in person. Like, I went to school with her. And she spelled it the same way this character spells it. It's kind of funny. Not funny, because that's kind of the normal way. People always assume it's 2 N's, right? Like, no, I only have one. But yeah. Okay, so anyways. So Logan West is the new doctor in town. He's arrived in town with his 5-year-old niece, Molly. Oh my God, I lost her name. And Molly has lost her father and her grandmother, who was her primary caregiver after her father passed away. And so now Logan is her primary caregiver. But Molly's 5 years old and has experienced a lot of loss in her very young 5 years. So she is very reserved from Logan and kind of trying to protect herself. And she doesn't know anybody in this town, right? Because they've moved here from San Francisco, but even that wasn't where Molly lived with her grandmother. So Logan has moved to town in order to provide kind of a simpler life for Molly and just a better lifestyle. And they move in next door to this lavender farm, which Jeanette runs. But Jeanette has only lived in town a few years, and after a lot of losses herself, she's really closed herself off to the community, to people. She just kind of focuses on her business and does very little other than attend church in the community. And doesn't really, like, she never even knew that the house next door had sold and somebody else moved in until this dog comes running into her property. And so I felt for Jeanette, and it's like, it's so sad when somebody closes themselves off from everybody else. I mean, I get it, but loneliness is not the answer for protecting yourself, because that's sad. It's really sad. And Logan is trying his best with Molly, but he's really struggling. But he is trying and trying to get her out of her shell. But Molly is like, I mean, she's alone. They don't really know anybody in town. And so they go to the taco truck that Charlie runs, and everybody kind of talks about in town. We've known him from the beginning of book 1. And Charlie's kind of like almost a mentor to the community, always comes up with like the right thing to say at the right moment, kind of guide them to different things. And so the secondary storyline is the town, two of the churches in town have sponsored this Syrian family to come to town. And so we've got the father, the grandmother, and the daughter. Like, so the father, the granddaughter, the father's daughter. And they've come from this war-torn country. And the little girl is the same age as Molly. And they happen to meet at a farmer's market, and Jeanette ends up getting involved because she offers to teach English to this family because that's her background. And she was really, really hesitant about it, but when nobody else stepped up, like, she's like, no, I have to do this. And so the two little girls become friends, even though they don't speak the same language. And it was amazing how kids communicate and bond that way, right? And so I really enjoyed following kind of the little girl's storyline and the grandmother that's really trying to embrace this new life and trying to like establish and encourage her son to kind of, I mean, her son's really struggling. Like, he's really, right? They've been through a really hard time. But the grandmother is like trying to be very positive about it, and I really enjoyed her. And kind of watching the family grow and establish in the community and kind of get more comfortable around the English speakers and make a life for themselves. And I really enjoyed that. And then I really enjoyed seeing Logan and Molly's relationship and try to kind of, Logan is trying to show Molly that he is there for her and he loves her and is not going to, his plan is not to leave her, right? Which is really what Molly is really worried about because she's lost everybody she loved and depended on. And then we have Jeanette. And I really, like, I felt for Jeanette. I really liked her. And the way that she, steps up and helps this family. But I didn't feel the connection between Logan and Jeanette that I think, like, that ends up getting established as you move throughout the book. I wasn't rooting for it. I just didn't feel it. I really cared much more about the friendship and watching the Syrian family grow. I really like the character of Logan, though. Like, he was definitely my favorite character in the book. My negative of the book, other than not feeling the romance relationship, is the book moved really slow at times. Like, it just, okay, And so I gave this 3 stars because I just didn't feel the romance for it. But I still plan on reading book number 6 because I love this community. So, yes. And the quote that I'm going to share from that is, "Don't let fear stop you from being everything God intended you to be." Then the next book I read was Missing Isaac by Valerie Fraser Luesse. Yes, I think. I always debate, how do I say this name? But I think that's how I said it. So in this one, we are in 1960s in Alabama. And so we've got the race divide between the whites and the African Americans. Then we have the class divide between the wealthy and the not so wealthy, the poor families. The ones that live in kind of they call them the hollows in here, so I think kind of like trailer park type setting. They just don't have the land or the homes that the middle or the upper might have. And we are following Pete, who starts the book as 11 years old. And in the very first chapter, his father dies in a tragic farm accident. So they own a cotton farm. And Pete is part of the wealthy class. His family has people working for them on the cotton farm. And we see that his dad and one of the farm workers, who is of a different race than him, and he worked for them, so Isaac, have become friends. And so when his father gets killed, Isaac kind of takes Pete under his wing and kind of really tries to be a father figure for him. And so at the beginning, I was really getting Huckleberry Finn vibes from this book. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, because I did not like the Huckleberry Finn book. And that is like one of the books that I DNF'd halfway through the book. I've never finished it. And so I was like, oh, I don't know. And I'd never read this author before, right? So I really wasn't sure. But then Isaac goes missing. And so there become rumors around town of what happened to Isaac. And Pete is determined at 12, 13 years of age to try to figure out what happened to Isaac. And so he starts looking. In the midst of his searching in a certain area, he meets Debbie, who is from the kind of the other side of the tracks and from a different class than him. And so, but he meets her and they start building a friendship. And Pete has been told by his grandfather to stop the search. Let the grandfather handle it, because it's too much for a 13-year-old boy to deal with. So kind of we see Pete's role kind of, he's not actively looking anymore. There's a lot of possibilities of what happened to Isaac, and not good possibilities, right? I mean, he went missing and nobody can find him. There's a reason, right? And so from that point on in the book, it really became kind of Pete's coming of age story. And we watch Pete go from that 11-year-old boy that he started at the beginning to probably 17, 18 by the end of the book. And so we've seen him go through high school, and we've watched his friendship with Debbie grow throughout the book into a romantic relationship, into love, and kind of what's going to come next. And there are scenes throughout where we see the grandfather is actively looking and trying to figure out, he's brought in the FBI to try to figure out what's happened to Isaac. But the grandfather has money and can do this, right? And the sheriff in town is not very skilled in his job. Let's put it that way. So I was really intrigued, and I was shocked at how much I really enjoyed watching Pete and Debbie's relationship grow, because we're following young teenagers growing up. And I'm not normally drawn to the younger, like to teens in books. I usually more relate to the adults, right? But I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And then there's a secondary storyline with Pete's mom. And so I really enjoyed following her. And kind of getting, which again is not surprising because she's the adult in the book, right? And so there's a romance relationship blooming there for her. And I really enjoyed kind of watching that, and is that going to happen? Or are they, right? Because again, they're from two different classes. Can they get over that? Can they work through that, right? And so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. What I did not enjoy was once we do find out what happened to Isaac and kind of who is responsible for what happened, that was it. It ended. And it was like, well, what happened to them? Like, did they just get off with it or get away with it? Yeah, but it didn't feel like there was full closure on that. So, and at times it moved a little bit slow for me. But I really enjoyed the characters. My favorite scenes were definitely the ones with Pete's mom and her sister. Each time the two of them got together, I was just laughing so much because his aunt, the sister, just speaks her mind. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And I think the race relations was handled really well. And what else I didn't like is the time jumped throughout the book. So we've got 1962, like each chapter has a date in front of it, so you know when it happened, right? And it went, 1962 when the accident happened, and then it went to 63, 64, right? Like it worked up. So we're following 6 years. So he's 17 at the end of it. And so, but it seemed like there was only one scene, like say 1964, there was only like one day in that whole year, right? And so it jumped at times, and I had to go. So I started the next chapter, and we've got the date, and I'm like, okay, when did the, like, how much after the next one are we? So I always had to go back to the other chapter to see, okay, where was that one? And so that was like kind of, that took me out of the story at times, because I had to figure out, okay, wait, we're now 6 months later, we're now 8 months later, we're now, okay, we're a year and a half later, right? And it was like, okay. And then I could get back into the story. Okay, now I know we're here, so what's going on now, right? So I didn't really like that. And as I said, I'm not a big fan of following younger characters through a growing up. But for me, and this is where I'm like, I really think I got to go for a half-star thing, because it's not a 4-star for me, because I don't know if I want to reread it again. But it's not a 3, because I did enjoy certain aspects of it and kind of trying to figure out what happened, and then what's going to happen with Pete and Debbie, and what's going to happen with Pete's mom. Like, I was really invested in the characters. So it's a 3.5 for me. So it's a high 3 for me. I rated it as a 3 on Goodreads, but it is closer to a 4 for me. So yes, and I definitely do want to try more by this author in the future. There's a new release coming out, or might already be out, in August that really intrigues me. So yeah, I will definitely try more by her. So then the next book I read was Point of No Return by Susan May Warren. I did not enjoy this book. I just did not like the characters. I didn't get into the story. I didn't enjoy it. I don't know. This was a reread for me, and I'm not really sure why I kept it on my shelf, because as I was reading it, I was like, oh, yeah, I remember not liking this back then. But I couldn't. I mean, I still didn't know what happened until as I was getting into it, because this was released in January of 2011. So, it's quite a few years ago when I read it. And so anyways, it's a second chance romance, which I'm not a big fan of to begin with. Then we have the characters of Chet Stryker and May Lund. And so Chet has left the army, and I think it's the army. And he has formed his own security business, and May is a pilot who was also in the army at one point and has left after some incidents happened. And she was hoping to work for Chet's business as a pilot, but he turned her down and said, no, I don't want you working for me. And so basically he broke her heart, and they are no longer together. So now the book picks up a year later. May's nephew goes missing in the country of Georgia on a missions trip. And so May impulsively calls Chet and asks for help. Can you help me find him in Georgia? And Chet says, do not go to Georgia. It is not safe. It's a war-fighting country. Do not go to Georgia. And, let the police and the embassy do their jobs and find him. Well, May goes to Georgia. And then Chet ends up in Georgia, and which is not safe for him due to past experience, past happenings that happened in Georgia. And so he's a wanted man in Georgia. And so they meet up in Georgia. May doesn't know. He scares her when they meet up. And they kind of are forced to work together for their own safety. They do not want to work together, especially May. They are both very, very stubborn characters. They both have their opinions, but like, they just drove me insane. They fought constantly. They both thought they were right each time, and just, they drove me insane. Because they were constantly fighting, and then all of a sudden they're declaring love for each other. And it was like, wait, what? Like, what? And then Chet's team finds him and rescues him at just the right moment when they didn't even know where he was and that he was even going to the country of Georgia. I was just like, really? Total fiction story. They do find the nephew. I won't say anything else about that, but they do find him. But I did not like the way the book ended. No. This one is being unhauled because it just drove me insane. So then I finished an audiobook, Breaker's Reef by Terri Blackstock. This is book 4 of the Cape Refuge series. So we are following the same characters that we met way back in book 1. It follows them the whole way through the series. And in this one, teenage girls are missing. And one girl is found dead. And it's kind of like, okay, so what's happening to these teenage girls? And can they find the missing girls? And one of the characters that we know, that we met again in book 1, is one of the girls that ends up going missing. And can they find her in time? With the other one that's gone missing. I was really intrigued on what's going on here. And I thought I knew who the kidnapper was, who was behind everything that happened. Nope. Got to the end, it was revealed, and it was like, oh, I hadn't even suspected them. Like, really? Wow, I love when a book takes me like, because then I'm like, okay, how did I miss that? Because there's certain things that happen, so it had to be somebody that knew about this to be able to do that, right? Okay, well, how did they know about, right? Like, I was just like, so then I was like, kept going back and thinking, and that is explained at the end, thankfully, because I was like, well, wait, how did they know that this to be able to do that? And that, like, it's explained exactly what I heard, right? And it was like, okay, I believe this. And the character of Sheila really annoyed me in book 3. She annoyed me to no end. In this book, I was rooting for her. I really liked her, the way she's grown, the way she put her faith in God and trusted him. It was like, no, he's going to take care. He's going to, we'll get out of this, right? Like, we will move past this. And I was really impressed with her. I really like that. And then it wraps up very nicely the storyline of the 2 sisters that we met in book 1, where their parents had been killed, and now it's kind of moving on from that. And the way the story ends for the 2 of them, I really enjoyed it. So I give this book 4 stars, and I really think, I mean, this is an older series, but the way it ended, it really could pick up more for a lot of the other, like even the sisters' characters or some of the other characters in the book. I think more stories could be built off of these characters, but this is the end of the series. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I was really invested in the story and the characters and trying to figure out what happened and who did it. Then the last book that I just finished was on my Kindle. It was Dangerous Beauty by Melissa Koslin. Now, this is a book that I remember as soon as Katie from Paperbacks and Ponytails finished the book, she messaged me on Instagram and said, I just finished a book I think you're really going to enjoy. And so then she was telling me, I'm like, ooh, that really sounds up my alley. So it is a romantic suspense and features a marriage of convenience, and the subject matter is human trafficking. And so I added it to my want to read list, and then when it was on a Kindle sale, I picked it up. I think January, February this year, a while back, anyways. And then a couple of my other YouTube friends read this book and they really enjoyed it. And I'm like, oh, I got to get to this book. So for me, this was my hyped book to read for August. And so now I've read it. What did I think? Wow. I really enjoyed following the characters of Liliana and Merrick. So Liliana has been kidnapped and forced into they're trying to sell her, so she's in the midst of human trafficking, and she is able to escape. And she's on the run at the very beginning of the book. Like the opening sentence is, she ran. And so we're following that, and then during that time she runs into Merrick, meets Merrick, and Merrick comes as her savior and says, I'm going to get you out of this. And Liliana is Mexican, and now she's in Texas. And the only way I can get you out of this is if you marry me, and I will protect you. And so they get married. So there's the marriage of convenience. That's all within the first chapter. And so then we kind of get to know a little bit more. And we're seeing Liliana try to learn English better, become more fluent in it, and because Spanish is her primary language, right? And Merrick is trying to give her the space to heal and overcome. And he, pulled her out of this, but he's also kind of trying to keep himself at a distance. And we don't know why exactly, what's going on with Merrick. We know there's a lot of secrets he's keeping and with his business or what else he's doing. And there's a lot of negative reports coming out on the news about him and stuff. And Liliana's that's not who she sees, right? Other than he seems to be avoiding her because he set her up in his penthouse and given her own room, give her kind of whatever she wants. He's given her money, she can go out and come and go as she wants. She's not trapped at all. But there are people that perceive that he is keeping her and trapping her, right? And I'm just like, no, he's not. But then he's also not being open to her. And he is really avoiding her. And she is alone a lot of the time in his place. And I'm like, I really, the character of Merrick really, really intrigued me. Because why did he rescue her and then avoid her? What? Right? And he's very, very reserved, very cold, closed off to people. There's only a very handful number of people that really know him, and even they don't really know him. And I'm like, what is his backstory? And what is his business? And what is he doing? I was really intrigued. And I loved Liliana, the strength and the fighter. So she's escaped this situation. And then she is willing to put herself in the situation to save others. I'm just, wow. Wow. So I really enjoyed that side of the story and following it and seeing, can they stop this group? And because the buyer is still after Liliana, and can they figure out who this buyer is and stop him? And so I was really, really intrigued on that side of it. What took the book down for me is I really wish we got more from Merrick's point of view and kind of got to know Merrick a little bit more and in his head. And that there was a few mentions of God and faith, but I really wish there was more of it. There just wasn't a lot. And then I really wish there was an epilogue at the end. Because what happened? Like, I would love to see a little bit further. So we, like, yes, it does wrap up the human trafficking story. Like, we find out who the buyer is and whether or not they get caught. And, like, that part of the story is. But, like, the relationship between Merrick and Liliana, like, where does that go? What happened? Like, because I was really, I mean, it's a marriage of convenience. Of course I'm rooting for them to, like, form a connection, be open, and just, even though Merrick avoided Liliana at times, she really kind of got into his head and got to know him, and they were able to communicate without words, which became very, very, like, helpful in certain situations that happened, right? So I really enjoyed that. I just wish we got to know a little bit more of Merrick's character. But I really enjoyed the way human trafficking was handled. You really felt for the characters that are stuck in this and trying to get it out, and kind of the effects it has on the people around them. So I really enjoyed that aspect. I just wish there was a little bit more character development with Merrick and more faith, because there was very little faith mentioned. So I gave this book 4 stars. It would probably be a 4.5 if I did the half stars. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I will definitely read more by this author because I was hooked. Like, it kept me intrigued. I read this in 2 days, and they were 2 busy days for me when I didn't have a lot of reading time. I devoured this book. I just really enjoyed it. So yeah, that is what I have read so far this month. So, I mean, 5 books, that's pretty good for 10 days of the month. Like, I'm impressed. Have you read any of these books? Do any of these books intrigue you? I would love to chat in the comments below, and I would love it if you would like and subscribe to my channel and look for future videos. Thank you. Bye.